you. Just confirm one. Anyone?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So yes. So today we are meeting for an orientation class where we will be discussing about a unit and also about the syllabus that what you are going to read throughout this CUCT 2024 preparations. So before I begin, I would ask few questions to you, right, from the very beginning. That you all are primarily third year students, right, studying in
Yes, yes, yes.
different universities, and in most of Indian universities, you will find that the topic history of British English literature is introduced to you in the last year, right? In most of the universities. Although it's very important unit altogether because in first year or in second year of your graduation, you read certain poems, you read drama, you read novels, and they all are somehow connected to a particular era or particular age. Right now, when you look at British literature, you find there are certain periods, certain time frames that are divided, and through which there are certain characteristics that you have to follow in order to understand what kind of literature and creativity has been done during the time frame. And that is one of the reasons why in your examination, in your CUCT MA English 2024 examination, they ask around 60% questions from the history of British English literature. Right? There are certain different units, and more or less 60% questions are from history of British English literature, and they are linked with different units as well. A few days back, we have shared one video related to the syllabus of MA English 2024, the detailed syllabus and analysis, along with the book recommendations on YouTube. Have you watched that video? ये सबने देखा है इस वीडियो को?
Yes, yes,
Yes,
yes.
sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
तो अगर आपने उस वीडियो को देखा है तो you might be knowing that there are units that are provided by CUCT as well, like history of British English literature, in the same way history of Indian English literature, literary criticism, literary theory, literary terms, genres, right, as well as recent trends that are going on. Now, अब जब आप पूरा पेपर के बारे में देखते हो तो if you have watched the video, you might be knowing that there are 75 questions from part B, 25 questions are from part A. Now, in part B, there are different units. History of it begins with history of British English literature, obviously because it's coming from there. Then you have literary criticism, literary theory, and literary terms, genres, so on and so forth. What we'll be doing in this class, orientation class, I will be introducing with all of you the main unit, that is history of British English literature, and with the help of this unit, I would like to show you how this unit is related with different units altogether, and importance of this particular unit, and how you will read while going through this particular unit altogether. So this is my plan for orientation class. I will be introducing you all the ages, how to go through the British English literature, and how this unit is related to other units that are prescribed in your syllabus, that is criticism, theory, so on and so forth. Okay, so basically, just a second, yes. So the very first thing that we will be doing today is I will acquaint you with the history of English literature. ये है क्या, कहाँ से इसका origin हुआ, क्यों हमको history of English literature पढ़ने की जरूरत है, और कैसे ट्रेंड्स हैं, कैसे इवेंट्स हैं जो थ्रू आउट हिस्ट्री आते हैं, और उन कैसे वो एग्जाम्स में वैसे क्वेश्चंस को वो फ्रेम करते हैं. Along with it, you have this literary terms unit in your syllabus, and it's very confusing as well because they have given you around 20 literary terms, but that's not the end, right? That's not a dead end because there are so many things, and everything can be considered as a literary term. So I will be introducing you that aspect of it as well, that how to look at particular thing as literary terms. Along with it, I will also try to enable you to recognize certain features of literary genres, right? How drama is different from comedy, and when I say drama, I mean tragedy. How it's different from comedy. How comedy and drama is different from novel. How they immerse the history of it, and what kind of questions they're asking in your examination. This is what I will ask. I will introduce you in this particular class. Now, जब भी आप history को पढ़ते हो, आपको पता होगा there are certain names that are given to it, right, to every particular age. Like and why it's important to read from the very beginning is something that that is important to understand this history, the beginning of history as this. Like for example, if I ask you, are you real Indian? What will be your reply? Anyone? Do you consider that you are a true Indian in your spirit? all will probably say yes, right? But now if I delve into what Homi K. Baba has to say in his work called Nation and Narration. सबने होमी के बाबा का नाम सुना होगा शायद. कई सारी थ्योरीज उनकी आती है जो आपको लिटरेरी थ्योरी में पढ़ना होता है, राइट? तो होमी के बाबा अपने नेशन एंड नरेशन वर्क में एक क्वेश्चन पुट फोर्थ करते हैं दैट are you really true Indian living in the world in which, post globalized world in which we are living now? Do you think you are true Indian? And everyone will reply with yes. Obviously you will say that I am a real Indian, right? But he gave you an options, right? Like if I ask you, people before 1600, people who were living between 1600 and 1947, and people after 1947, like you guys and me, we all are part of people who are living after 1947. So now if you have to choose one option, what true Indians, what would be? Anyone before 1600 or 1600 to 1947 or 1947 to the time in which we are living in? And there's a reason why this distinction has been done, made. Because 1600 was the time frame when East India Company came to India, right? You might be knowing about that कि 1600 से ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी पहली बार इंडिया में आती है और वहां से चेंजेस हमको देखने को मिलते हैं. तो एनीवन वुड लाइक टू रिप्लाई? 1600 से पहले के लोग, 1600 से 1947 के बीच के लोग, या 1947 के बाद के लोग, आप किसको कंसीडर करोगे एज इंडियन, राइट? Probably people living in before 1947 or before 1600, you can say, right? Why? Because there was no introduction of British during that time frame. So we had our own culture, we lived accordingly. But that is one important thing to notice at this juncture. Why? Because if you know that true Indians are those who are living before 1600, and when you look at the literature of Indian literature, you will find that it begins somewhere around 1900, right? When these British people came, they have introduced us with English. सबने मैकॉले का मिनट सुना होगा, right? Macaulay came with his minute in 1835, and that is because there was a tussle that what kind of study, what language should be used while teaching Indian people. हिंदी यूज करना चाहिए या इंग्लिश यूज करना चाहिए, और इसीलिए 1835 में after the second charter act he was introduced to, and that is how English was introduced in India. Now जब हम इंडियन हिस्ट्री को भी पढ़ते हैं तो हम इंडियन लिटरेरी हिस्ट्री या इंडियन इंग्लिश इन हिस्ट्री को पढ़ते हैं तो वो उसी बिगनिंग से स्टार्ट होता है जहाँ पे कुछ राइटर्स आएंगे एंड दे विल इमिटेट दोस ब्रिटिश मास्टर्स. फिर हम रेनेसा पीरियड देखते हैं जहाँ पे गांधी एंड अदर्स दे वर राइटिंग, राइट? 1930s में आप देखोगे 3 पिलर्स आते हैं नॉवेल के, और वो जो जितना भी सोशल मूवमेंट इंडिया में चल रहा था उसको वो नॉवेल के अंदर रिप्रेजेंट करते हैं. एंड देयर इज अ डेवलपमेंट दैट यू विल फाइंड फ्रॉम देयर ओनली. In 1940, after 1950s, you will find Indian sensibilities. If you might be knowing about Anita Desai and others, right? 1970s में जब आप पहुंचोगे तो आप देखोगे सलमान रश्दी राइटिंग को लिख रहे हैं और मैजिक रियलिज्म को इंट्रोड्यूस कर रहे हैं. And there is a development that you will find. So, in order to understand everything, you need to go back in history. You need to to grasp from where it began. Same way, when you read British history, it's quite large, right? Because कई सारे डिविजन्स हैं, कई सारे पीरियड्स हैं, और कहाँ से क्या रीजन है, किस डिवीजन को किस पर्सपेक्टिव से रखा गया है, क्यों ऐसे डिविजन्स हैं, इसको समझने के लिए हमको रूट में जाना पड़ता है. एंड व्हेन यू विल गो बैक टू द रूट, यू विल फाइंड इट ऑल बिगिंस विद 55 BC, राइट? ट्रू इंडियंस जैसे क्वेश्चन आपने पुट किया, वैसे सेम ट्रू ब्रिटिश लोग कहाँ थे, तो इट गोज बैक टू 55 BC व्हेन देयर वर ट्रू ब्रिटेन, ब्रिटिश पीपल दे वर लिविंग, एंड दे वर ब्रिटॉन्स या केल्टिक नाम सुना होगा आपने शायद. मॉडर्न एज में अगर W.B. जैसे राइटर्स को पढ़ा होगा तो एक रिवाइवल आया था जिसको हम केल्टिक रिवाइवल बोलते हैं, राइट? सो सेम वे में केल्टिक्स वर एक्चुअली ट्राइब्स, ब्रिटॉन्स वर ट्राइब्स दैट वर लिविंग somewhere around 55 BC, and they were original inhabitants of England. वहाँ के बाद से क्या हुआ है, रोमन अटैक हुए हैं, रोमन्स ने इंग्लैंड के ऊपर रूल किया है. फिर somewhere around 5th century you will find that they have to left for Rome, and that is how England was open to invasions. और फिर कई सारी जर्मनिक ट्रैप्स आती हैं, अटैक करती हैं इंग्लैंड के ऊपर, और फिर एक हिस्ट्री पीरियड जो आपको शुरू होते हैं वहीं से शुरू होते हैं. यू माइट बी नोइंग अबाउट ओल्ड इंग्लिश पीरियड और एंग्लो सेक्शन पीरियड फॉर दैट, राइट? सो जब आप हिस्ट्री को देखोगे इस तरीके से, जब आप ब्रिटिश लिटरेचर के बारे में थोड़ा सा जानते होगे, तो यू विल बी नोइंग दैट कि जो नेम्स हैं वो अलग अलग तरीके से दिए गए हैं. कुछ एजेस को मोनार्क्स के नाम पे जाना जाता है, उनको रॉयल एरास बोलते हैं बिकॉज ऑफ द नेम्स वर गिवन आफ्टर द king or queen that were ruling over the time frame, like the golden period of English literature, that is Elizabethan period, right? 1558 to 1603, that is the time frame when Queen Elizabeth was ruling over England, और उसको Elizabethan period भी बोलते हैं, Shakespearean period भी बोलते हैं for different reasons. In the same way, when Queen Victoria was ruling over England in somewhere around 1837 to 1901, उसको हम Victorian period बोलते हैं. That means कि कुछ ऐसे ages हैं, कुछ ऐसे periods हैं जिनको हम मोनार्क्स के नाम से जानते हैं. There are other periods जिनके नाम author centric हैं. Author centric in the sense कि because there is one writer who is prominent in that particular era, had a very significant contribution not only in literature but also in the time frame for socio-political reasons, and that's why the name is named after them. Like Chaucer की age 1340 to 1400 is known as age of Chaucer, or for example Dryden's age, which is also known as Restoration period, from 1660 to 1700. So some ages were named after monarchs, some ages were named after the prominent authors that were writing during the time frame, and you will find some ages are also named on literary movements, right? किस तरीके से लिटरेचर लिखा जा रहा था उस एज में, क्या कैरेक्टरिस्टिक थी लिटरेचर की, उसके अकॉर्डिंगली उन्होंने क्या किया, डिवीजन कर दिया. एंड दिस डिवीजन हैज बीन डन ड्यूरिंग द 1950s 1960s. It's a very recent phenomena. जब Victorian age में, for example, if any writer is writing, he is not aware of the fact that he is writing in Victorian time frame. And this has been done in the modern or post-modern time frame. तो कुछ ages को literary movements के नाम से जानते हैं, जैसे New Classical period for that matter, 1660 to 1785. Why New Classical? I will be discussing it later. Or for example, Romanticism, right? Writers came and they started talking about feelings, emotions, which was very different back then when you think of New Classical period. So there are cases between these ages, and you will find every age is different from another. And that's why जिसको वो प्रिपर्स करता है उसमें आप देखोगे कि बिल्कुल डिफरेंट कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स के साथ लिटरेचर को प्रोड्यूस किया जाता है. तो जो आप न्यू क्लासिकल में देखोगे, रोमांटिसिज्म उससे बिल्कुल अलग होगा, और रोमांटिसिज्म के बाद विक्टोरियन एरा आता है तो वो भी उससे बिल्कुल ही अलग आपको दिखेगा. और यही एक रीजन है कि wait, am I audible now? Sorry, there was one.
Yes, audible. Continue it, whatever you are delivering.
Okay, okay, just a second. Let me just. Is it visible?
And kindly please speak loudly, sir.
Okay, is it audible? Is it visible now?
Not
Yes, it is
visible but
visible.
audible.
Yes. Is it visible now?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. So as I was mentioning, Some ages were named after the monarchs, some were named after the author that were prominent during the time frame, or some after the literary movements, the kind of writings that were being written during the time frame, and how you characterize particular age with certain characteristics. इस तरीके से age का movement हुआ. In the same way, there are certain ages which were named after languages that were used, like Old English period, right? Also known as Anglo-Saxon period, but for a different reason. Middle English period, after Anglo-Saxon you have this Anglo-Norman period, or Middle English period is further divided into three parts in that reason. So there are ages which are named after languages that were being used during the time frame as well. These are four criteria you will find. First, the monarchs one, the author-centric ages, the ages based names based on the literary movements, and also the language that is used during the time frame. तो ये पूरा कन्वेंशन जो है वो हम ब्रिटिश हिस्ट्री के अंदर देखते हैं. नाउ एक बहुत बेसिक सा क्वेश्चन भी है और बहुत डिफिकल्ट भी हो जाता है समटाइम्स, बिकॉज यू विल फाइंड इन डिफरेंट बुक्स different timelines has been given to literary ages, right? अगर आप रूटलेज उठा के ब्रिटिश हिस्ट्री पढ़ते हो तो आपको विक्टोरियन एज का जो टाइम फ्रेम मिलता है that is very different than the for example J Long. If you read it, you will find a disparity between that, and that's why it's very important to understand the timeline. क्या करेक्टरिस्टिक है कि किसी एज को एक पर्टिकुलर टाइम फ्रेम दिया जाता है और दूसरे एज में हम इंटरजेक्ट करते हैं तो दूसरे टाइमलाइन के साथ हम उस चीज को देखते हैं. तो आई विल गिव यू अ ब्रीफ अमाउंट ऑफ इट, एंड देन वी विल लुक इनटू हाउ टू go through these particular ages in general. So the very first period that we begin with is the Old English period or Anglo-Saxon period. Basically जब आप किसी यूनिवर्सिटी में पढ़ते हो और वहाँ का हिस्ट्री ऑफ इंग्लिश लिटरेचर का सिलेबस देखोगे तो it begins with age of Chaucer, and that is there's a reason for that. You might be knowing that Caxton introduced the printing press for the very first time in 1476. That is 15th century, right? And he has published.
No, sir. My university started from Old English period.
Yeah, in some universities you will find, but mostly and even in examination as well, they ask questions from they begin from Chaucer. If you leave behind all the previous year question papers from DU for that matter before 2019, you will find there are questions from Old English and from middle period as well, and there is a reason for that. But in some universities you will find it begin with Chaucer, because Chaucer was the person who introduced English for the very first time, right? East Midland dialect was there and he converted it into English for the very first time, and that's how English came into being. And then after 100 years there was Caxton, who introduced printing press in 1476, and that's how he started publishing works. So that is one of the reasons why when you go back in history, there are writers who have basically anonymous, you don't know the writers, right? Or probably there are very few manuscripts that are prevailing, and that's why when you go back in history, you find that 55 BC was the time frame when original inhabitants, right, like true Indians, true British people, they were living somewhere around 55 BC. After that, the Roman came, and Roman Empire was great during that time frame, and they have attacked and they have started living in Britain, and that's how Britain was converted into Roman Britain. तो जो Britons tribe थी वही क्या होते हैं, वहीं से हमको Britain नाम भी मिलता है. Now they will live in Britain from 55 BC to somewhere around 450 BC, and that is the time frame when they have to live, because
approximately from 5th century.
Yeah, till 5th century they were living during there. So what the point is, when Rome was attacked at that time frame, they have to leave for England, for their own country to survive for. और ये ऐसा मूवमेंट था जहाँ पे इंग्लैंड वाज ओपन टू इन्वेजन, and there are some Germanic tribes like Anglo-Saxon Jutes. They have attacked over England and they have started ruling over it. So this is how the first period, that is Anglo-Saxon period, begins somewhere around 450 AD, and it will be there till 1066. 1066 again there is a Norman conquest that will be there. Now the second period is the Middle Ages, which is further divided into three parts: the Anglo-Norman, Age of Chaucer, and Age of Darkness. I'll be introducing why this age, Anglo-Saxon period, is known as Old English, and why the period after that, like Norman period, Chaucer, and Darkness period, why it's known as Middle Ages. There is a reason for that, right? Now, after 1066, these people from Normandy, they have attacked French people and they have started ruling over England. उसी से 1066 till 1558 यस, वॉर ऑफ हेस्टिंग्स या उसी को नॉर्मन कॉन्क्वेस्ट बोलते हैं, राइट. सो
Yes,
ये
yes.
जो टाइम फ्रेम है 1066 से till 1558, again in different books you will find somewhere around 1550 1540, वो मेंशन कर देते हैं कि ये मिडिल एजेस है, या एज ऑफ डार्कनेस को भी 1550 1530 तक सम अप कर देते हैं. But for your understanding and to know from where Elizabethan period began, this is a important division. So first you will find that Anglo-Normans were there till 1066 to 1340, and then Chaucer was born in 1340. So 1340 to
To 1400.
Chaucer died. This age also sums up. In the same way, after Chaucer,
Okay, okay.
there was no literary production, in standard of Chaucer.
This is known as the Dark Age.
Yes. So age of darkness or age of revival. Why revival? You will find there are certain things that are happening, and we'll be discussing that as well. Now, after Queen Elizabeth started ruling over England from 1558, we will find that Tudor dynasty started ruling over England from 1485. There is one war that we will be discussing later on, and after that, Elizabeth, Tudor dynasty will start ruling. So from Henry VII to Henry VIII, and from Henry VIII to Edward VI, from Edward VI to Mary, and then finally Queen Elizabeth will start ruling over England. And this is a period of stability. देखिए आप देखोगे हिस्ट्री में क्या होता है, धीरे धीरे से 10-10 साल का रूल होता है, 5-5 साल का रूल होता है, तो जो पॉलिटिकल स्टेबिलिटी है वो इंग्लैंड को नहीं मिलती है. But when Elizabeth will start ruling over England from 1558, and she will rule over there till 1603, that is 45 years of period, and which is politically not that upheaval, and that's why you will find with political stability there will be a stability in literature as well. So many writers, drama flourished in this time frame, poetry flourished in this time frame, and you will find writers like Spencer, Sidney, and others. They were writing during the time frame of Elizabethan period. So this is what Elizabethan period is. I will be discussing it later on. Now, yes. So when Queen Elizabeth died, she was, she hadn't married at that time frame, so there was no heir, and that's how you have to go back again in history in order to understand how Tudor, after Tudor dynasty there is a Stuart dynasty that came into it. जब आप हिस्ट्री में पीछे जाते हो, तो you will come to know that after Henry VII there was Henry VIII, right? And Henry VII had a daughter as well, Margaret, which was married to James IV of Scotland, right? So James IV of Scotland was married to the sister of Henry VIII. So after James IV you have James V, and after James V you have James VI. Now when Queen Elizabeth died and there was no heir, he was called for. So that is the very first time when Scotland and Britain throne merged together, and James I started ruling over England for the very first time. So you see, James I Latin में Jacobean बोलते हैं, that is why the age is named after him as Jacobean period. He will be there till 1625, and then his son Charles I will be there ruling over England from 1625 to 1649. Now this is also a very period of turmoil. You will find how James I was king who has taken so much of bribe, so much of debt, and that's why that will impact the next period, the Caroline period as well. Now there was a civil war that will took place in this particular era, and in 1649 for some reason Charles I was beheaded, and for the very first time democracy was introduced in England. That is from 1649 to 1660, which is known as period of interregnum or Commonwealth period. Interregnum means in between. So before this particular era there was anarchy, that king was ruling over there, and after this period again king rule will be established. So केवल 11 साल के लिए डेमोक्रेसी को इंट्रोड्यूस किया जाता है, और आप देखोगे कि कितना टर्मोइल हो जाता है इस एज में कि आफ्टर 1660 अगेन people talk to Charles II and he was again back to the throne. तो इस यहाँ से हम 1660 में एक चेंज देखेंगे, और उस टाइम फ्रेम में 1660 से 1785 का जो पूरा टाइम फ्रेम है उसको हम नियो क्लासिकल पीरियड कहते हैं, राइट. नियो क्लासिकल पीरियड को फर्दर 3 पार्ट में डिवाइड किया जाता है, दैट इज रेस्टोरेशन एज or the age of Dryden, which is the first part of it, 1660 to 1700. Then we have Augustan period, or which is also known as age of Pope, which was there from 1700 to 1745, and last age of sensibility or age of Samuel Johnson as we call it, from 1745 to 1785. Now one more thing that is important within this age is that England was Roman Catholic from the beginning, right? Even when French appeared, they were Roman Catholic. So Catholicism was prevailing over England. But you will find that from Catholicism, Protestantism will emerge somewhere around 15th century. And then there was Reformation movement took place, Lollard movement, you might be knowing that. And till 17th century, you will find that Puritan came into being, right? We'll be discussing what is Catholicism, how it's different from Protestantism, or how it's different from Puritans. But 1620s was a time frame when you will find that Puritans were at peak, and Puritans and Catholicism, Catholic people, they were totally against to each other. Puritans were too much into religion, and that's why you will find when this Commonwealth period was going on, you will find that theaters were closed. You might be knowing that 1642 to 1660 was the time frame when theaters were closed in England, and there is a reason for that, because these Puritans, they thought that we are born sinners and we should be we should be praying every time, and we should be repenting because our forefathers Adam and Eve have committed crime. So that kind of mentality, these Puritans were had this kind of mentality, and that is also in a way inspired by Calvinism. John Calvin, एक मार्टिन लूथर के साथ में जब हम रिफॉर्मेशन मूवमेंट को पढ़ते हैं 15th सेंचुरी में, तो वो कैल्विन उस फिलोसफी को लेके आते हैं जिससे प्यूरिटन्स काफी इंस्पायर्ड होते हैं. तो 1620s के टाइम फ्रेम में आप देखोगे कि प्यूरिटन्स ने रूल करना स्टार्ट कर दिया. इन वे पॉपुलेशन में ज्यादा प्यूरिटन्स आ जाते हैं, बिकॉज कैथोलिसिज्म में करप्शन प्रिवेल हो जाता है, और वो सारी कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स इंपॉर्टेंट है किसी एज को समझने के लिए. तो 1620 से 1660 को हम लोग प्यूरिटन एज भी बोल देते हैं, राइट. एंड देयर इज अ रीजन फॉर दैट. व्हाई? बिकॉज उस टाइम पे प्यूरिटन्स लोग जो है उनका राइज ज्यादा हुआ और वो रहने लगे. अगर आप जॉन मिल्टन को जानते होंगे, मिल्टन was born in 1608, he died in 1674, and he was writing in 1630s, right?
John Milton is known as Paradise Lost.
Yes, he's known for Paradise Lost, and in 1632, when second folio of Shakespeare was published, in that particular folio, his first poem on Shakespeare was published for the very first time. So
yes.
1620s to 1660s was the time frame when Puritans were at their peak, and that's why 1620s to 1660s also known as Puritan age. But there are different divisions as well. जब आप न्यू क्लासिकल में जाते हो 1660 से 1785 का पूरा टाइम फ्रेम को न्यू क्लासिकल बोलते हैं. न्यू क्लासिकल सिंपली मीन्स जो क्लासिकल राइटर्स थे आप उनको कॉपी कर रहे हो. दैट्स व्हाई यू विल फाइंड in the later half of 17th century or the whole 18th century, will imitate those ancient writers. Arnold called 18th century as age of reason and prose, because reason is important, intellectualism is important, fact is important, right? Content is not that important, but form is important. That's why you will find heroic couplet and other form emerging in this time frame. Now this is divided into three parts: Restoration period, or Dryden, who was born in 1631 but he died in 1700, and with the death of Dryden, this age is also summed up. In the same way, Saint Augustus was ruling over in Rome during the time frame, and these writers who were writing in the first half of 18th century, what they will do, they will imitate those writers like Horace, Virgil, and others, and that's why this age is named as Augustan period. Or Alexander Pope was the prominent writer who was writing in this age. That's why age of Pope as well. Now, in this period, you will find Jonathan Swift and age of Pope. These two writers were writing prominently in this time frame. 1744 was the time frame when Pope died, and Jonathan Swift was the time frame when 1745 was the time frame when Jonathan Swift died, and that's how this age is also summed up. In the same way, Samuel Johnson, you might be knowing about his contribution like dictionary or the preface to Shakespeare that came in 1765, or Lives of Most Eminent English Poets. These are some of the works that Samuel Johnson has written and has a remarkable position in literary history, and that's why the next age is known as Age of Sensibility, or the age of Samuel Johnson. Or sensibility, because you will find there is a shift that is going on. Now, after this, like Puritans that were entered within in between, in the same way you will find that there are some writers. आपको 1750s 60s में ऐसे राइटर्स मिलेंगे जो दो चीजों के साथ में एक्सप्लोर कर रहे होंगे, राइट. दे विल बी फॉलोइंग द ट्रेडिशन ऑफ न्यू क्लासिकल, बट दे विल बी यूजिंग द फॉर्म और कंटेंट इन अ वे ऑफ द रोमांटिक पीरियड. आपको पता है रोमांटिसिज्म बिल्कुल अलग है न्यू क्लासिकल्स. इन अ वे न्यू क्लासिकल एज में जिन चीजों को वैल्यू दी जाती है, लाइक रीजन, लाइक empiricism, you might be knowing about empiricism, right? क्या होता है? Mind is a tabula rasa, white slate. So you will write everything through your experience. There is no place for emotion. There is no place for feelings. There is no place for middle class for that matter, right? You will be looking at the aristocratic versions that were written, and no space for nature. So neoclassical is very different time frame than the romanticism. क्योंकि romantic में जब आप जाते हो तो वर्ड्सवर्थ, कोलरिज, कीट्स, शेली, बायरन, साउदी ऐसे राइटर्स को पढ़ते हो जो मेनली इमेजिनेशन के बारे में बात करते हैं, फीलिंग्स के बारे में बात करते हैं, इमोशंस के बारे में बात करते हैं, जिसको कोई स्पेस नहीं दिया गया इन द न्यू क्लासिकल पीरियड. And that's why after that there is a new era that is known as romantic period emerged in 1798. लेकिन इंपॉर्टेंट चीज क्या है देखने को कि जब आप एज ऑफ सैमुअल जॉनसन देखते हो तो वो 1785 में एंड हो जाता है विद द डेथ ऑफ सैमुअल जॉनसन. बट द न्यू एरा दैट इज रोमांटिक पीरियड begins in 1798, and that is the work Lyrical Ballad was published in 1798. The first edition of Lyrical Ballad was published in 1798, in which there are 23 poems, 19 by Wordsworth and 4 by Coleridge, and that is to be considered as a starting or beginning point of the romantic period. Right now, इससे पहले क्या है आप देखोगे 1750s से ही there is a tradition, right? कुछ राइटर्स हैं जिन्होंने एक तरीके से एक्सपेरिमेंट करना स्टार्ट किया. वो फॉर्म यूज करेंगे न्यू क्लासिकल, कंटेंट यूज कर लेंगे रोमांटिक्स, या कंटेंट यूज करेंगे न्यू क्लासिकल और फॉर्म यूज कर लेंगे रोमांटिक. आपने ग्रे का नाम सुना है? ग्रे ने एक पोएम लिखी थी दैट वाज पब्लिश्ड इन 1751, एलिजी रिटन इन कंट्री चर्चयार्ड, व्हिच इज एन एग्जांपल ऑफ ग्रेवयार्ड पोएट्री, राइट? Or for example, this is also the time frame when Gothic literature came into being. Gothic novels were being written, and there was Gothic element which started. And in Gothic element, you will find there are emotions, right? Like fear will be emerging. So ये ऐसा time frame आया जहाँ पे एक shift आपको देखने को मिला, और दोनों ही form को हमने देखा कि writers क्या कर रहे हैं, explore कर रहे हैं. And that is why from half part of 18th century to the end of 18th century, primarily it is known as pre-romantic periods. Writers like Thompson, Cowley and others, they were writing in a manner which was similar to mix of both of these time frame. इसीलिए उसको हम प्री रोमांटिक बोलते हैं. प्रिकर्सर बन के आया रोमांटिसिज्म का, और रोमांटिक ट्रीट्स हमको देखने को मिली in the same way like we used to see it in the Elizabethan period. इसीलिए हम उसको प्री रोमांटिक पीरियड बोल देते हैं. एंड देन विद द पब्लिकेशन ऑफ लिरिकल बैलेड इन 1798, the next period is known as romantic period. So from 1798 to 1837, when Victoria will start ruling over England, till then the period is known as romantic period or romanticism because of the characteristics that were prevailing. Then Queen Victoria started ruling over England in 1837, and she was there till 1901. So that whole period is known as the Victorian period. Now when you look at different books, you'll find that in some books it is mentioned that it begins with 1832 because there was a Chartist movement, working class movement that was going on, but it's not true. The real time frame is 1837, and if they ask in your examination, this is the time frame from where Queen Victoria started ruling over England, and that is why this time frame is also, it has a significant value as well. Now when she died in 1901, the Victorian period ended. Then obviously the modern period, right? 1901 to 1945, there are two world wars that 20th century experience. Now this, when we look into the modern period as well, they were also divided with the dynasties that were ruling. Like for example, Edwardian period was there from 1901 to 14, or King George V was ruling, so Georgian period from 1914 to 1945. And after that, everything that is written is a part of postmodern period after the Second World War, primarily till today. Right now, after some time, you will find that this era in which we are living will be known as post-humanism, because there are certain changes that took place somewhere around 1970s, 80s, and even in 90s after the globalization came. And you will find that after 20 years, the new age will be named as, postmodernism will end somewhere around 2000, and post-humanism will emerge. But that is for future. There is no distinction till now. This is the time frame of the whole British literature. You can see that's more than 2000 years of history that we have to cover. Now, what to look into British history, what to explore in every literary age when you are looking at it. The very first thing is the socio-political atmosphere and event, right? हर age के अंदर क्या हो रहा है, कौन से ऐसे socio-political events हो रहे हैं जो किसी एज को इफेक्ट करते हैं, and उससे हमारा नेचर भी, हमारा लिटरेचर भी इफेक्ट होता है. You might be knowing about Samuel Johnson, who said that every writer is a product of its age. Right? If you want to know about 18th century, you should give your day and nights to the writings of edition. This is what Samuel Johnson said in one of his letters. while discussing about writers like addition. So the important thing is कि whatever happening in the time frame has a very significant value, जो historical events हो रहे हैं और वो literature को भी बहुत impact करते हैं, right? जैसे throughout history आप अगर देखो तो beginning from the age of Chaucer, even before that the things that were happening, war was there. So जब आप देखते हो कि जब England was open to invasion, you will find that Anglo-Saxon Jutes, they have started ruling over England for the very first time, and you will find there were wars, and there also Augustus came and he started converting people into Christianity. So two things were there: one, how England was converted into Christian England, and another thing was the war that was going on, Viking invasion, बहुत सारे war again and again जो है इंग्लैंड के ऊपर रूल करने के लिए अलग अलग जगह से लोग अटैक करते हैं. When you will look into the literature of the time frame, you will find that poetries are either written in elegiac manner, where you are talking about the demise of people who died in wars, elegies basically, or you will find the heroic deeds in them. और the second kind of poetries that were written are mainly religious. तो आपको दो वर्जन मिलेंगे, religious और war poetry. Within war you will find elegiac or the heroic representation of heroic deeds. So that is how socio-political event affect the literature of the time frame. In the same way, when you look into age of Chaucer for that matter, कई सारे historical events हो रहे हैं, like 100-year war is one of them, right? 1337 to 1453, this is 116 years of time frame, but बीच में रुक के वॉर होते थे, कुछ ट्रीटी साइन होती थी, और इसके अंदर भी कई सारे वॉर हैं जो एक अपना सिग्निफिकेंस लेके आते हैं, बिकॉज उन वॉर की विक्ट्री से आप देखोगे कि इंग्लैंड के अंदर नेशनलिज्म भी प्रिवेल होता है. सो दैट मीन्स कि जो 100-year वॉर है उसका एक अपना सिग्निफिकेंस है. और फॉर एग्जाम्पल ब्लैक डेथ दैट केम इन द एज ऑफ चॉसर, राइट, 1348 के अराउंड, जो 5 साल में तो 3 बार रिपीट होता है. इन द सेम वे देयर इज टेलर्स रिबेलियन, जिसको हम पीजेंट रिवॉल्ट भी बोलते हैं. Or for example, Lollard movement that began somewhere around 1380s. So as I've told you that the time frame of Chaucer was a time frame when England was Roman Catholic, right? Roman Catholicism क्या है? एक ऐसा ब्रांच है क्रिश्चियनिटी का जो शुरुआत से प्रिवेलिंग होता आ रहा है. बट यू विल फाइंड बिकॉज कैथोलिसिज्म में और क्रिश्चियनिटी में क्या होता है कि जो पोप होते हैं दे हैव द सुप्रीम अथॉरिटी. उस टाइम पे लिटरेसी का रेट नहीं था, तो व्हाटएवर those pope will be saying will be considered as a true thing or something that should be commanded or should be respected. So there was a time somewhere around Chaucer age you will find that the church was corrupt, these pope were corrupt, so whatever they wanted to do they were doing. Like for example, there was one saying that you will find in Everyman के बारे में जानते हैं, mystery play, morality play, miracle play, drama का भी development साथ ही साथ होता है. You will find that there is one very important scenario that particular drama talks about, that sin is inevitable, repentance is always possible. That means कि आप कुछ भी करो आपको हमेशा repent, आपको माफी हमेशा मिल जाएगी चर्च से. So what people used to do, for example, if you kill someone, you can go to the church, you can give some money and you will be given pardon. तो इस तरीके के करप्शन जो है इंग्लैंड के अंदर प्रिवेल होना शुरू होते हैं, and that is one of the reasons why you will find Wycliffe and Purvey, John Purvey, who was a student of Wycliffe, they have started revolting against it, and there is a movement called Lollard movement that came into existence, right? Lollards were the followers of Wycliffe. तो वहाँ से आप देखोगे कि क्रिश्चियनिटी के अगेंस्ट जो है क्रिश्चियन करप्ट, जो रोमन कैथोलिसिज्म के अंदर करप्शन है उसके बारे में वो बात करना स्टार्ट करते हैं, और वो चीजें आपको लिटरेचर के अंदर भी देखने को मिलेंगी कि कैसे वो इफेक्ट करता है लिटरेचर. फॉर एग्जाम्पल अगर आप चौसर एज से आगे बढ़ते हैं, लाइक 1400 to 1558, the other part of मिडिल एजेस को डार्क एजेस किसने बोला? मिडिल एजेस को पेट्रार्क. यू माइट बी नोइंग अबाउट पेट्रार्क, सबने सोनेट के बारे में पढ़ा होगा, सोनेट पेट्रार्कियल सोनेट के फॉर्म के बारे में पढ़ा होगा. So this is the time frame when Chaucer was writing, and the same time frame in Italy Petrarch was writing. तो और आप देखोगे भी चौसर जो है इटली विजिट करते हैं, there is a significant influence of Petrarch on Chaucer that you will find in his writings like House of Fame. Now later on when you find that Petrarch compared this age with the ancient age when writers like Homer and the others were writing, and he said this is a dark age because no literature has been produced. And you will find after Chaucer, the standard that was set by Chaucer when he died in 1400, from 1400 to 1558, there is no great literature that has been produced, and that's why darkness period, dark बोल दिया उस एज को, राइट. तो आप देखोगे कि कुछ सिग्निफिकेंट चीजें हो रही हैं, जैसे fall of Constantinople for example that took place in 1453, और वहां से रेनेसा का बिगनिंग होता है. अगर आप देखो 1455 to 1485, दैट इज वॉर ऑफ वॉर ऑफ रोजेस, जहाँ पे 85 में जिसके रिजल्ट से ट्यूडर डायनेस्टी का इमर्जेंस होगा, या 1476 का आप देखो प्रिंटिंग प्रेस इंट्रोड्यूस कर दिया जाता है. द वर्ल्ड बिफोर प्रिंटिंग प्रेस, द वर्ल्ड आफ्टर प्रिंटिंग प्रेस हैज अ वेरी डिफरेंट scenario altogether, like the world before internet or the world in which we are living, right? Totally different, with very similar notion that you will find in this particular, at that particular time frame as well. Some works were produced, like 1516 Utopia was published, considered as one of the important work. But overall, you will find in the 150 year span of 150 years after Chaucer, there is no great work that has been produced. But writers were there, like British Chaucerians were there, or Scottish Chaucerians were there. Some historical events that were also taking place. The introduction of printing press is also has a very large impact on literature, because now Caxton has started producing literature, and you will find the change throughout history because of that particular incident. तो कुछ सोशो पॉलिटिकल एटमॉस्फेयर में कुछ ऐसा हिस्टोरिकल इवेंट हुआ जिसने हिस्ट्री को थ्रू आउट चेंज कर दिया. सेम वे जब आप एलिजाबेथन टाइम फ्रेम में इंटर करते हो, तो वहां पे आप देखोगे स्पेनिश अर्माडा होता है समवेयर अराउंड 1588, एंड दैट टर्न्स Queen Elizabeth as people start looking at Queen Elizabeth as a goddess. और वहां से भी आप चेंज देखोगे, that will result into a political stability. Political stability will result into a literary stability, और इसीलिए पूरा एज को आप गोल्डन पीरियड बोलते हो. जब आप राइटर्स पढ़ते हो तो स्पेंसर, सिडनी, शेक्सपियर, सोनेट इंट्रोडक्शन, सोनेट सीक्वेंस, पहली बार इंग्लिश में ब्लैंक वर्ड्स का यूज होना, पहला ड्रामा लिखा जाना इंग्लिश में, पहली कॉमेडी लिखी जाना. सो देयर इज अ रीजन फॉर दैट, बिकॉज द एटमॉस्फेयर प्रोवाइड दैट काइंड ऑफ फ्रीडम टू ड्वेल इन. सिमिलरली जब आप आगे बढ़ोगे तो ड्रामा का डिक्लाइन होगा, सिविल वॉर आएगा, राइट, मेटाफिजिकल पोएट्री आएगी. सो जो जितना भी पॉलिटिकल एटमॉस्फेयर है वो कहीं ना कहीं लिटरेचर को बहुत ज्यादा जो है इम्पैक्ट करता है. और पूरे हिस्ट्री में आप देखोगे इन एवरी एज, बिफोर looking into every age, you have to look into the historical events of things that were happening in order to understand what kind of literature has been produced during the time frame, and why also why these works have been produced during the time frame in which these writers were writing. So in that sense, socio-political atmosphere and historical events are very important to understand the literature that is written during the period. Another thing is literary techniques and characteristics. When you read a writer, you will look into how they are using techniques. In the same way, you will also find in every time frame there are certain techniques that have been used by the writers. Like अगर आप बिल्कुल शुरुआत से बात करो, ओल्ड इंग्लिश पीरियड को देखो, तो you will find certain instance of use of alliteration और use of kennings. For example, kennings क्या होते हैं? Metaphors होते हैं, right? जैसे वॉर्स हो रहे थे, तो टू रिप्रेजेंट द क्वालिटी ऑफ द वॉर यू नॉट से स्वेट और द ब्लड, बट यू विल से वॉर स्वेट. तो ब्लड के लिए आपने वॉर स्वेट यूज किया. फॉर एग्जांपल मून के लिए अगर आप स्काई कैंडल यूज करो, ये कैनिंग है, जो बिकॉज वॉर्स वर गोइंग ऑन, सो पीपल वर ट्राइंग टू कन्वर्ट थिंग्स इनटू मेटाफर्स टू रिप्रेजेंट इट इन लिटरेचर. इन द सेम वे जब आप चौसर एज पढ़ते हो तो एलिगरीज आना शुरू हो जाती है, राइट? ड्रीम एलिगरी, हाउस ऑफ फेम, और फॉर एग्जांपल लैंगलैंड जो पायर्स प्लूमेन लिखते हैं, जो ड्रीम एलिगरी के बारे में हम पढ़ते हैं. सो ड्रीम एलिगरी, अगर आपने कुबला खान पढ़ा होगा कोलरिज का, तो आप देखते हो कि वहां पे उस चीज को इंट्रोडक्शन मिलता है. बट ये बहुत हिस्ट्री में थ्रू आउट आप देखोगे कि ये शुरुआत वहां पे हो चुकी है. सेम वे आप देखोगे वर्जिल एंड अदर्स, दे वर राइटिंग पास्टोरल फॉर्म, एंड दैट वाज इंट्रोड्यूस्ड इनटू इंग्लिश फॉर द वेरी फर्स्ट टाइम बाय स्पेंसर. तो स्पेंसर जैसे राइटर्स रेनेसां टाइम फ्रेम में पास्टोरल एलिजीज लिखना स्टार्ट कर देते हैं. फिर एक पूरा ट्रेडिशन है जो एलिजी का आपको पढ़ना पड़ता है. जॉनरा में भी आपको पोएट्री पढ़नी पड़ती है, जो एलिजी के रेफरेंसेस में कि हिस्ट्री में कैसे एलिजी को लिखा गया है उसको आपको पढ़ना पड़ता है. तो कुछ एजेस में आपको टेक्निक्स मिलेंगी, स्टाइल मिलेंगी, थीम्स मिलेंगी पर्टिकुलर एरा में, और आपको समझना होगा कि कैसे ये चीजें किसी लिटरेचर के टाइम फ्रेम को शेप करती है. जब पूरा हिस्ट्री आप पढ़ लोगे तो आप किसी भी एज के बारे में सोचोगे तो आपको पता चलेगा, ओके दिस एज, फॉर एग्जांपल अगर आप न्यू क्लासिकल एज के बारे में सोचते हो, आफ्टर रीडिंग इन दैट वे यू विल बी नोइंग दैट हीरोइक कपलेट वाज यूज्ड देयर वाज नो स्पेस फॉर ब्लैंक वर्ड्स, the literature was aristocratic, form was given important, right? ये सारी चीजें जो हैं, जब आप टेक्निक्स को समझोगे, कैरेक्टरिस्टिक को समझोगे कि किस तरीके से राइटर लिख रहा है या क्या एज में एटमॉस्फेयर प्रोवाइड हो रहा है कि उस चीज को हमको देखना पड़ रहा है. दैट इज द सेकंड थिंग दैट यू हैव टू एक्सप्लोर इन एवरी पर्टिकुलर एरा इन ऑर्डर टू अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट काइंड ऑफ राइटिंग्स हैज बीन रिटन. अभी हम राइटर पे पहुंचेंगे नहीं, उसके पहले ही हमको ये सारी चीजें पढ़नी होती है. देन मेजर लिटरेरी इवेंट्स और मूवमेंट्स एंड स्कूल ऑफ थॉट्स एज वेल, राइट. कौन से इवेंट्स हो रहे हैं, अभी हमने हिस्टोरिकल इवेंट्स देखा. इन द सेम वे देयर विल बी लिटरेरी इवेंट्स दैट आर गोइंग ऑन. अब जब आप मॉडर्निज्म पढ़ते होंगे फॉर एग्जांपल, तो बहुत सारी मूवमेंट्स के बारे में आपको सुनने को मिलेगा. कई सारे स्कूल ऑफ थॉट्स आएंगे, जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल रियलिज्म और फॉर एग्जांपल नेचुरलिज्म, सरलिज्म, थिएटर ऑफ ऑब्जर्व, ये सारे नाम आपने सुने होंगे, राइट. तो हर एज में आपको कुछ लिटरेरी मूवमेंट्स देखने को मिलेंगे. तो बिगिन विद द अर्लीस्ट, फॉर एग्जांपल एज ऑफ चौसर, आपको पता है कि बाइबल ट्रांसलेशन होता है पहली बार, राइट. सो Wycliffe was the person who translated Little Bible into English for the very first time, और वहाँ से ही लुलार्ड मूवमेंट की स्टार्टिंग होती है, क्योंकि जब इंग्लिश में ट्रांसलेट कर दिया तो people had access to it, and that is how people have started knowing about the corruption that was prevailing in the church of the time frame. That become a movement, and you will find in 15th century or 16th century, Martin Luther and other, they have started a movement altogether which is known as reform movement, reformation movement in general. और वहाँ से आपको दूसरी ब्रांचेस क्रिश्चियनिटी की देखने को मिलेंगी. तो दैट मूवमेंट बिकेम इम्पोर्टेंट. यू विल फाइंड दैट राइटर्स आर राइटिंग अबाउट इट एज वेल. लाइक 1526 Tyndale came with his Bible, right, translation of Bible, and was burned alive for that. Coverdale came with his Bible in 1535, and that was the first complete Bible in English that was produced somewhere around 1535. So एक movement start हुआ, movement establish किया, और वो literature के अंदर भी आपको देखने को मिला. सेम वे जब आप पढ़ते हो एलिजाबेथन पीरियड को, तो आप यूनिवर्सिटी विट्स को पढ़ते हो. यूनिवर्सिटी विट्स में
Kindly please sir to conclude it.
What?
To conclude it, sir.
What? Let me introduce these things with you. So that is how you will talk about the movements, school of thoughts that were prevailing during the time frame. Then major authors, obviously, in every age you have authors who are writing. There are ages who are named after authors. So when you look into history from that perspective, you will find from Chaucer.
I mean, sir, to conclude this meeting, sir.
But we'll be discussing half hour more for that. Is there any issue?
Okay, sir. Continue it.
If you have any issue, you can visit the recording that will be provided to you. Okay. So
recording will be available, sir.
Yes, it will be available to you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. So yes. So when you look into the literature of the time frame, in every age you will find there are certain authors, and they have written certain works that are important, right? Chaucer से आप start करते हो, तो in age of Chaucer you will find Chaucer is a prominent one. There are minor writers as well, Coward, Langland and others, but Chaucer was the prominent major author. When you think of, for example, Renaissance or the Elizabethan period, writers like university wits. In poetry you find Spenser, Sidney, Shakespeare. Then in the next stage you will find Ben Jonson. In the new classical period you will find Dryden, or in 18th century you will find Pope, Jonathan Swift. And then there's an introduction of novel, the four pillars of novel. In the Victorian era, Dickens, Hardy. In the modern era you will find T.S. Eliot, Virginia Woolf and others. So in every age there are certain major authors, and they have written works, and they are directly asking questions from those works, the basic introduction of those particular works that you have to look into. Then, like major authors, there are minor authors as well. Minor authors, I mean lesser known works of them. Like if you think of, for example, Bunyan, right? Last year they have asked question from John Bunyan. You might not consider him as a major author, but he has written certain works which have certain significance while entering into after the Restoration period. Like Leviathan came up with, Hobbes came up with Leviathan in 1651. You may consider it as a lesser known work or written by a minor author, but it has a great valuable contribution to put forth, and that's why they are asking questions from there as well. In the same way, the next thing that you have to look is evolution of literary genres across eras. जब आप हर एज में देखोगे तो कुछ नया इमर्जिंग आपको दिखेगा. जैसे ड्रामा की जब आप बात करते हो तो फॉर एग्जांपल एलिजाबेथन टाइम फ्रेम है जहाँ पे इंग्लिश में पहली बार ड्रामा शुरू आपको देखने को मिलेगा, यूनिवर्सिटी विट्स आएंगे, शेक्सपियर लिखेंगे, शेक्सपियर के बाद ड्रामा का एवोल्यूशन होगा, और इसके पीछे भी आप देखोगे from the middle ages as well there is literary plays that were performed, then mystery play, miracle play, morality play, and that is how there is a chain of dramas that were written till to the most postmodern period जहाँ पे आपको कॉमेडी ऑफ मिनास मिलता है या थिएटर ऑफ एब्सर्ड मिलता है। तो क्रॉस एजेस आपको ड्रामा का डेवलपमेंट देखने को मिलेगा। सेम वे पोइट्री का डेवलपमेंट भी आपको इसी एजेस में दिखेगा, अलग अलग टाइप्स की पोइट्रीज लिखी जाएंगी, मूवमेंट्स आएंगे। इफ यू एंटर इनटू द मॉडर्न पीरियड एज वेल यू विल फाइंड दैट हर 10 साल में, हर डिकेड में आपको एक नया मूवमेंट स्टार्ट होते हुए दिखेगा। फ्रॉम 1890s का डिकेन मूवमेंट फॉर एग्जांपल, 1910 में यू हैव सरलिज्म, दादाइज्म, इमेजिज्म, 1920s में you have the lost generation, 1930s में you have the Auden group of poetry, right? 1940s में you have apocalypse poetry, 50s में you have movement poets। तो आप देखोगे धीरे धीरे पोइट्री का, ड्रामा का, नॉवेल का, एस्से का जो अदर फॉर्म ऑफ क्रिएशन है थ्रू आउट हिस्ट्री, वो कैसे एवोल्यूशन उनका हो रहा है, कैसे उनका डेवलपमेंट हो रहा है, आपको इस पर्सपेक्टिव से भी हिस्ट्री को देखना चाहिए, राइट? देन to understand notable forms of genres that were prevailing in every age, and then types of it, like poetry for example there is ode, there is sonnet, there is ballad, drama maybe there are different types of drama, novel में picaresque novel, epistolary novel, gothic novel, बिल्डिंग्स रोमन नॉवल, कई सारे आपको टाइप्स भी देखने को मिलेंगे, और कौन से टाइप्स कहाँ इमर्ज हुए, क्या उनका रूट है, क्योंकि आपके पास एक अलग अलग यूनिट है दैट इज जॉनरास, लिटरेरी जॉनरास, एंड यू कैन नॉट जस्ट रीड एवरीथिंग सेपरेटली बिकॉज दिस इज रिलेटेड टू हिस्ट्री। How writers are writing poetry, right? Writers are writing drama, novels. So within history, you can also look at the perspective का हर एज में कैसे कौन सी पोइट्रीज लिखी जा रही है, किस तरीके का ड्रामा है, किस तरीके का नॉवल है, और कैसे जॉनरास जो है वो प्रिवेल कर रहे हैं, उनकी हिस्ट्री कहाँ से स्टार्ट होती है। दैट इज ऑल्सो वन ऑफ द वेज थ्रू विच यू कैन लुक एट द हिस्ट्री फ्रॉम दिस जॉनरा पर्सपेक्टिव। देन when you read major authors, there are literary awards, and last year they have asked so many questions ranging from Nobel Prize to Sahitya Academy to Booker Prize to even Gyanpith Award, कई सारे questions examination में पूछे गए। जब आप ब्रिटिश हिस्ट्री को पढ़ें तो you will find from the modern time frame there are certain awards that are given to writers. Nobel Prize 1960s, Booker Prize, there are writers who won Booker Prize twice. और जब आप अमेरिकन पढ़ते हैं, ऑल्दो अमेरिकन लिटरेचर इज नॉट अ पार्ट ऑफ योर सिलेबस नाउ डायरेक्टली, बट देयर इज कंपैरेटिव लिटरेचर एंड देयर आर राइटर्स हु आर पार्ट ऑफ कंपैरेटिव लिटरेचर एंड दे आर फ्रॉम अमेरिका, बट यू विल फाइंड कि वहाँ पे भी कुछ अवार्ड्स हैं, ऑल्दो दे विल नॉट आस्क डायरेक्टली, बट जो ऑथर्स हैं जिनको अवार्ड मिले हैं वो और उनके वर्क्स भी वहाँ पे इंपॉर्टेंट हो जाते हैं। इवन द ईयर्स इन विच दे वर बीइंग अवार्डेड, वो भी एक तरीके का क्वेश्चन है जो वो पूछते हैं। तो व्हेन यू आर लुकिंग एट टू हिस्ट्री, you also need to look at the literary awards and recognitions that were given to the writer. Now this is from from beginning to from Old English period to the postmodernism. But now when you will find certain questions are also asked from contemporary British literature. When I say contemporary, that means the time frame in which we are living. What are the recent developments? Last year they have asked one question from Gothic, from graphic novels, or फॉर एग्जाम्पल सिक्स वर्ड्स नॉवल या AI के ऊपर इन्होंने पैसेज दे दिया। तो ये कंटेम्प्रेरी ब्रिटिश लिटरेचर के अंदर क्या हो रहा है, कौन से राइटर्स हैं, किस तरीके के डेवलपमेंट्स हो रहे हैं, इस चीज को भी एक्सप्लोर करके यू कैन लुक इनटू द लिटरेचर ऑफ द टाइम ऑफ द प्रेजेंट टाइम फ्रेम इन ऑर्डर टू अंडरस्टैंड कि रिसेंट डेवलपमेंट्स हमको लिटरेचर के अंदर क्या मिल रहे हैं। दैट इज ऑल्सो वन ऑफ द एरियाज दैट यू कैन लुक इनटू। देन when you complete British literature from that perspective, there is a comparative literature, right? That is again a unit that is given to you. So in that sense, you can compare British literature's influence on other literatures. You will find, जैसे आप अमेरिकन में ट्रांसेंडेंटलिज्म देखते हो, which is highly influenced from the रोमांटिसिज्म ऑफ ब्रिटेन। सेम वे कई सारी रिटेलिंग्स मिलेंगी, कई सारे इम्पैक्ट आपको देखने को मिलेंगे ब्रिटिश लिटरेचर के दूसरे लिटरेचर के ऊपर, एंड दैट इज ऑल्सो इम्पोर्टेंट कि कैसे ब्रिटिश लिटरेचर ग्लोबल लिटरेचर को, ग्लोबल कल्चर को कैसे जो है इम्पैक्ट कर रहा है। नाउ द कल्चर, एज यू नो, द पॉइंट वेयर वी हैव बिगिन कि 1600 से 1947 के बीच में when East India Company was prevailing in India, after 1947 the hybridity came into being, we became hybrid Indians, right? The hybrid culture started prevailing. So same way जब आप British literature को पढ़ते हो तो you will find certain Indian writers, they are imitating British British masters, and then you will find the Indian version of it as well. So how British literature influenced those writings and how it impact to the culture and to the writings of the other literatures as well. Now, in British literature, you will also find literary debates, literary controversies that are going on. Censorship का नाम सुना होगा आपने, राइट? कई सारे सेंसरशिप्स लगाई गई थ्रू आउट फ्रॉम प्यूरिटन एज. प्यूरिटन एज में ड्रामा को 18 साल के लिए बंद कर दिया गया. फ्रॉम 1642 टू 1660 थिएटर्स वर क्लोज्ड इन इंग्लैंड. कई बार और भी अलग अलग रीजन से क्लोज हुए, लाइक प्लेग आते थे तब भी क्लोज होता था, बट सेंसरशिप लगी. 1737 में इतना लाइसेंसिंग एक्ट आता है और उसके बाद से पीपल हैव स्टार्टेड दे हैव स्टार्टेड राइटिंग नॉवेल्स, क्योंकि इतना ज्यादा सेंसरशिप लग जाता है ड्रामा के ऊपर. In the same way, you will find there is war of theatre going on somewhere around 1599 to 1601, because before that there was a bishop's ban. Bishop, दो कैंटरबरी और चर्च के बिशप ने क्या किया, ये एक दूसरे के ऊपर सटायर लिखना को बैन कर दिया पोइट्री में. So what Ben Jonson was in favor of it, while Marston and Dekker they were opposing it. So they have started fighting with each other by writing plays, और उसी को हम war of theatres बोलते हैं. तो कई सारी डिबेट्स हैं, कई सारी कंट्रोवर्सीज हैं आपको मिलेंगी बिटवीन राइटर्स एंड हाउ दे आर रिस्पॉन्डिंग टू इट. व्हाट आर द इश्यूज, लाइक censorship जब स्टार्ट हुआ फ्रॉम प्यूरिटन टाइम फ्रेम टू द मॉडर्न एरा, यू विल फाइंड कि हाउ these things are also important in shaping the literature that was written in ages. Same way literary genres, journals and publication, right? अगर आपने क्वेश्चन पेपर देखे होंगे तो इससे बहुत से क्वेश्चंस आते हैं कि कौन सा वर्क किस जर्नल में या कब पब्लिश हुआ, कौन से ऑथर ने इसको पब्लिश किया. कोई मैगजीन है तो कौन सी मैगजीन, राइट? आई कैन थिंक ऑफ द डायल मैगजीन. दे हैव आस्क्ड वंस अबाउट दिस पोएम कॉल्ड द सेकंड कमिंग, किस मैगजीन में पब्लिश हुआ, राइट? या फॉर एग्जांपल writers who were writing in the time frame of Victorian era, Dickens के पब्लिकेशन का क्या नाम था, राइट? उनके वर्क्स जो है बेंटले मैगजीन में पब्लिश होते थे, उससे क्वेश्चन पूछा गया है. लंदन मैगजीन से लैम के कुछ वर्क्स पब्लिश होते थे, उससे क्वेश्चन पूछा गया है. तो कौन सी जॉनरास, एंड यू विल फाइंड इन 18th century when review began, right? The review in 1704. After that there is the Tetler, the Spectator. फिर सैमुअल जॉनसन आते हैं और उनके कई सारी मैगजीन्स आती हैं. When you enter into the romantic era, there is Quarterly Review, there is Edinburgh Review, और कई हार्श क्रिटिसिज्म भी किए गए इन जर्नल्स के अंदर. एंड ऐसे आपको पता होगा when Keats died in 1821, Shelley thought that he died because of the harsh criticism of Endymion that has been done by the Quarterly Review. तो ये जो जर्नल्स हैं और पब्लिकेशंस हैं, उनका लिटरेरी कैनन के अंदर भी बहुत रेफरेंस है. बहुत सारे राइटर्स ने अपने वर्क्स को पब्लिश किया और उनके बीच में एक कंट्रोवर्सी और एक डिस्कशन जो है वो जाता रहता है, और उस डिस्कशन से भी एग्जामिनेशंस में क्वेश्चन पूछे गए. दैट इज आल्सो वन ऑफ द थिंग्स दैट वी विल बी लुकिंग इनटू ब्रिटिश हिस्ट्री. अनदर थिंग इज हिस्टोरिकल माइलस्टोन्स, राइट? कोई नया पहली बार जब आता है, पहली नॉवेल कौन सी है, पहला ड्रामा कौन सा है, पहली जब पोइट्री आई तो एलिजी कौन सी कंसीडर कर सकते हैं, पहली पिकारेस नॉवेल किसको कंसीडर कर सकते हैं. तो ये जो माइलस्टोन्स हैं जो किसी पर्सपेक्टिव को चेंज करते हैं, लाइक इफ यू थिंक ऑफ इन टर्म्स ऑफ हिस्टोरिकल इवेंट, the very first milestone that I will consider is 1066. Then 1215, the Magna Carta that was signed changed the perspective, the way people look into the world. Or for example, the introduction of printing press. Same way, you can find different milestones in literature, point where things have changed throughout history. ये भी एक चीज है जो डायरेक्टली एग्जामिनेशन में पूछी जा रही है और वो ब्रिटिश हिस्ट्री का पार्ट हो सकती है, राइट? अब इन चीज को थोड़ा उसके थ्रू समझते हैं. लाइक age of Chaucer, you can look at 4 pictures that are there. Can anyone name कि क्या चीज है? Like the first picture that you have, this is of 100-year war, right? The second picture that you have here is of Mullard movement. So Wycliffe is teaching others about the reality. When he converted Latin Bible into English, that was the very first time when people come to know about the reality of the Bible, what is God actually trying to say. तो जो बीच के लोग थे वो वहाँ पे खत्म कर दिए गए, राइट? तो एक रिवॉल्ट आया, चेंज आया, जहाँ लोगों को सच्चाई पता चली. और फॉर एग्जाम्पल लुक एट दिस पिक्चर, दिस इज व्हाट टेलर, राइट? टेलर्स रिबिलियन हुआ क्योंकि 100-year वॉर की वजह से टैक्स बढ़ाए गए. पीजेंट्स ने क्या किया, अपना रेट को बढ़ा दिया, और उसी मूवमेंट पे आप देखोगे कि रिवॉल्ट हो गया. एंड people like Wet Taylor and others, they were being killed. This is picture symbolizing that. This is a picture of Black Death. 3/4 of people died in Britain, and how it influenced literature is also important. That's why socio-political context is one of the areas that you have to look into. Theatre, right? 1576 was the time frame when the theater was opened for the very first time. उसके पहले क्या थे? प्ले हाउसेस थे. प्ले हाउस थिएटर से कैसे अलग है, थिएट्रिकल कंपनीज कौन कौन सी आई, कैसे थिएटर का डेवलपमेंट हुआ. द थिएटर आया, स्नो थिएटर आया, रोज आया, ब्लैक फ्रायर्स आया, कर्टन आया, फिर फाइनली आप पढ़ते हो ग्लोब थिएटर जो शेक्सपियर से रिलेटेड है वो है. जो कई सारे रेनेसा के अंदर आप देखोगे कि एलिजाबेथन टाइम फ्रेम में कई सारे थिएटर्स को ओपन किया गया और उन्होंने पर्सपेक्टिव को पूरा चेंज किया. तो क्लोज थिएटर, ओपन थिएटर, देन क्लोज थिएटर, देन द थिएटर ऑफ द प्रेजेंट टाइम फ्रेम. आज कैसे एपिक थिएटर या थिएटर ऑफ द ऑपरेस्ट, थिएटर ऑफ द डिप्रेस्ड, ऐसे जो नए नए थिएटर्स आ रहे हैं वो कैसे एक दूसरे से अलग है और थिएटर कैसे रोल प्ले करता है. बिकॉज ड्रामा वाज एक्चुअली रिटन टू परफॉर्म नॉट टू रीड, राइट. लेटर ऑन जो चेंजेस हमको देखने को मिले तो वो थिएटर कैसे शेप किया चीजों को, वो भी एक पर्सपेक्टिव है जो आप देख सकते हो. देन स्कूल ऑफ थॉट लाइक रियलिज्म. आपको पता होगा कि विक्टोरियन एज इज नोन एज द एज ऑफ optimism for certain reasons because of the development that is going on. रेल इंजन आ गया, प्रिंटिंग प्रेस काफी चीप हो गया, कई सारे डेवलपमेंट्स हो रहे थे. बट एट द सेम टाइम इट इज ऑल्सो एन एज ऑफ पॉवर्टी, क्योंकि बहुत सारे लोगों ने लंदन में रहना शुरू कर दिया. लंदन सिटी बहुत क्राउडेड हो गया, जॉब अपॉर्चुनिटी नहीं थी, वर्क हाउसेस की कंडीशंस बहुत खराब थी. तो उस चीज को राइटर्स ने रिप्रेजेंट करना शुरू किया इन लिटरेचर. आई कैन थिंक ऑफ ठाकरे's इंटरव्यू. Thackeray, you might be knowing about Vanity Fair. Vanity Fair के बारे में सुना है? Vanity Fair is a novel that is written by Thackeray and there is a female protagonist in it, right? तो काफी ज़्यादा criticism होता है Thackeray का. And at that moment he wrote in one of the magazines that I have no eyes above my head. I write what I see. So I write what I see, the reality of the world that might be depressing for other people. और इसीलिए आप वो representations को देखोगे. Child labor का issue था. ये picture, the second picture that we have today, can anyone guess from where it is? Anyone? Any idea about it? The condition of the work houses, कैसे बहुत गंदा work conditions था और बच्चों के साथ, orphans के साथ बहुत issue होता है. Anyone? Any idea about this picture?
Oliver Twist.
Yes, it is from the Oliver Twist, right? I need more. This is what Oliver said, the first child protagonist of England, right? So it shows the realistic notion, and reality can be depressing for so many people, and that's why you will find Emily Zola came and he revolted against realism and he came up with naturalism, right? तो कैसे कई स्कूल ऑफ थॉट्स जो है वो आपस में इंटरलिंक्ड है और किस पर्टिकुलर मूवमेंट से वो चेंज होता है उस चीज को भी समझना, हिस्ट्री को समझने के लिए बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट. मेजर प्लेज, मेजर नॉवेल्स, मेजर पोएम्स, उनके समरी, एटलीस्ट अगर आप, इट्स नॉट पॉसिबल टू रीड एवरी वर्क, but it is important to read how development is taking place, critically analyzing the text to understand कैसे चीजों को बदला जा रहा है. सेम वे कैसे ड्रामा का हिस्ट्री हो रहा है, कैसे मिडिवल में क्या लिखा गया, रेनेसां में कैसे ड्रामाज आए, रेस्टोरेशन में कैसे ड्रामा चेंज हुआ, राइट. रेस्टोरेशन पीरियड वाज द वेरी फर्स्ट टाइम व्हेन वुमेन वर इंट्रोड्यूस्ड ऑन थिएटर. तो उससे क्या चेंजेस है, फ्रेंच इन्फ्लुएंस से क्या चेंजेस है, विक्टोरियन लिटरेचर के अंदर विक्टोरियन ड्रामा कैसे डिफरेंट है, राइट. धीरे धीरे ड्रामा डिक्लाइन हो गया and you will find novel came into being. There are writers who are writing novels, but there are writers who are also writing plays. You might be knowing about G.B. Shaw. G.B. Shaw has also written novels. Now, the G.B. Shaw को आप देखते हो तो he's famous for writing more than 62 plays, but he's also written 3 or 4 novels that are important, right? Macho and others, and they have asked questions related to that. Not in CUCT in last 2 years, but in NET examination, in JRF, in GATE examination, and also in separate Hyderabad University or flu entrance examination. Now they are part of your syllabus, so they may ask you questions in future related to that as well. Similarly, there are debates and controversies. Can you guess the first picture, what it is about? Anyone? If you know the second picture, this is a work called Areopagitica by John Milton. If you know the history of this particular work, you might be knowing about what this picture is actually symbolizing. Anyone? Any guess? Even if you read these lines, for the liberty of unlicensed printing to the Parliament of England. This is by John Milton. This work came in 1644, just after a censorship that has been produced by by the person in 1643. Any guesses? This is censorship. 1643 के अंदर censorship आती है for the very first time. Although Milton was in favor of the rule of Parliament, but he was also critical to the censorship. तो वहां पे जब सेंसरशिप आया तो प्रिंटिंग प्रेस की लिबर्टी के लिए, उनके नॉलेज के लिए, he came up and he wrote this work called Aeropagitica in 1644. Although he had personal reasons as well. This is the time frame when he was writing, treaties on divorce. He was married for 3 times, right? And there is a again marriage 3 बार करने के पीछे भी reasons है, right? Puritans जो हैं, they were hard believers of Bible of England was basically converted into one book and that book was Bible. And you will find कि कैसे changes आते हैं, ज़्यादा multiple marriages के पीछे भी कुछ reasons हैं why people are doing that. तो कई सारी debates हैं और controversies हैं और उनके resulted कई सारे works हैं जो आपको literature के अंदर देखने को मिलेंगे. ये work कई बार एग्जाम में पूछा गया है about the censorship and कैसे उसने लिबरेशन के बारे में, मीडिया लिबरेशन के बारे में इस वर्क के अंदर बात की. तो ये चीजें देखने को मिलेगी. मैगजीन्स हैं, थ्रू आउट हमने डिस्कस किया कि कैसे पीरियोडिकल्स और मैगजीन्स आते हैं और एग्जाम में क्वेश्चंस पूछे जाते हैं. सेम वे रीटेलिंग्स हैं, शेक्सपियर के एडाप्टेशंस हैं, राइट? शेक्सपियर के जब थिएटर को बनाने की बात की गई इन 20th century, you will find there are writers who have contributed in the retellings of Shakespeare. Not only Shakespearean retellings, they have also asked in your examination about retellings of famous work. For example, Odyssey का retelling क्या है? जेन ऑस्टिन की कई सारे वर्क्स हैं जिनको रिटेलिंग किया गया है. रॉबिन्सन क्रूसो, डैनियल डिफो, उसके प्रेजेंट डेज में कई सारे रिटेलिंग्स हैं. जितने भी इंपॉर्टेंट वर्क्स हैं उनको कैसे अडेप्टेशन किया गया है, नॉट ओनली इन द फॉर्म ऑफ लिटरेचर बट ऑल्सो इन फिल्म्स. शेक्सपियरियन वर्क्स के ऊपर कौन कौन सी फिल्म्स बनी हैं, ऐसे बहुत सारे क्वेश्चंस हैं. रामायण का रिटेलिंग, महाभारत का रिटेलिंग, फर्स्ट translation, these are also some of the areas which you can focus while reading the British history. Then as I've mentioned about the historical events, can anyone guess this picture is about what? Anyone? Any idea? ये किस चीज का पिक्चर है? और पहला दूसरा they all are same. ये बाहर से है और ये अंदर से है. Anyone? No idea. ओके, आपने क्रिस्टल पैलेस का नाम सुना है या ग्रेट एग्जीबिशन का नाम सुना है? When Queen Victoria started ruling over England, she wanted to show the power of England, right? Britain of that time frame. तो जितने भी goods थे और कम्युनिटीज थी, उसको उसने क्या किया, क्रिस्टल पैलेस के अंदर उसका शो कराया. एंड पीपल यूज्ड टू विजिट देयर टू नो व्हाट लंदन इज, राइट? दिस इज व्हाट the great exhibition that took place in 1851. In examination once in JNU, they have asked about the who introduced this this crystal palace, किसने ये बनाया था, डिजाइन किसने किया था क्रिस्टल पैलेस. एग्जाम में इस हद तक JNU में एग्जामिनेशन में क्वेश्चंस पूछे. दिस इज बाय टैक्सटन, राइट? टैक्सटन ने इस बिल्डिंग को बनाया था क्रिस्टल पैलेस, जहां पे ग्रेट एग्जीबिशन होता है इन 1851. तो ऐसे एरियाज को भी वो एग्जामिनेशन में टच करते हैं. JNU में पूछे गए हैं, CUET में लास्ट 2 ईयर में हिस्टोरिकल इवेंट्स पूछे गए हैं, पर ये पर्टिकुलर एग्जांपल उन्होंने नहीं पूछा है, पर आगे हो सकते हैं. दिस इज वन ऑफ द एग्जांपल्स कि कैसे हिस्टोरिकल इवेंट्स भी जो होते हैं वो आपको आपकी राइटिंग्स को, रीडिंग्स को इफेक्ट कर सकते हैं, राइट? देन यू कैन सी द लिटरेरी मैप. नाउ दिस इज इंग्लैंड एंड यू विल फाइंड कि कैसे अलग अलग जगह पे कौन कौन सी नॉवेल सेट है. तो जो सेटिंग है किसी नॉवेल की, ऐसे एग्जामिनेशंस में भी क्वेश्चन पूछे जाते हैं कि कौन सा वर्क कहाँ पे जो है वो उसको सेटिंग कहाँ पे वो वर्क हो रहा है. फॉर एग्जांपल यू कैन सी टेस्ट ऑफ हार्डी, यू कैन सी Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. Jane Austen has written only 6 novels, right? And you will find how domestic kind of writings have been produced by Jane Austen, only writing about 3-4 families. और कौन से एरिया को फोकस किया, जैसे मिडलैंड के बारे में बात की. फिर वैसे ही आप देखोगे कई सारे इमेजिनेटिव प्लेसेस भी बनाए गए राइटर्स के थ्रू, राइट? जैसे आर.के. नारायण को आप इंडियन लिटरेचर में पढ़ते हो फॉर क्रिएटिंग एन इमेजिनरी प्लेस. लाइक फॉकनर को आप इंग्लैंड में पढ़ते हो फॉर दैट, अमेरिका में पढ़ते हो फॉर दैट पर्सपेक्टिव. तो बहुत सारे राइटर्स ने इमेजिनेटिव प्लेसेस को भी बनाया है और बहुत सारे राइटर्स ने एक पर्टिकुलर एरिया को चूज करके उसके ऊपर भी राइटिंग की है. वो भी एक वे है किसी चीज को देखने की. So this is all about how to look at how to read British literature while thinking about all other prominent areas. ऐसे literary themes and सब आपस में related है. Like when you read realism is also a kind of literary term that you will find. राइटर्स किस तरीके की टेक्निक को यूज कर रहे थे, ये भी एक अलग से लिटरेरी टर्म है. टाइप्स ऑफ ड्रामा पढ़ते हो, टाइप्स ऑफ पोएट्री पढ़ते हो, वो भी एक तरीके का लिटरेरी टर्म बन सकता है. तो लिटरेरी टर्म कैन बी एनीथिंग, राइट? जो भी आप क्रिएट कर सकते हो. द वे पीपल हैव रिटन, द characteristics, the metaphors that they have used, all are a part of literary terms. So literary terms, British literature, comparative, they all are in one way or another, they are related to each other. और ये एक पर्सपेक्टिव हो सकता है जिसके थ्रू आप पूरी हिस्ट्री को पढ़ सकते हो, फ्रॉम ओल्ड इंग्लिश पीरियड टू द पोस्ट मॉडर्न पीरियड इन जनरल. ओके, क्लियर टू ऑल ऑफ यू?
Yes.
Okay, so this is how you can look into the historical significance, the whole British literature in general. This was an orientation class, the introduction class of related to history, how you can look into the the main important unit, that is हिस्ट्री ऑफ ब्रिटिश इंग्लिश लिटरेचर. अब आप किसी लिटरेचर को जब पढ़ते हो, ब्रिटिश हिस्ट्री को पढ़ते हो, तो एक एक एज के साथ आप उसको एक्सप्लोर कर सकते हो, एक एज में क्या हुआ उसमें इन सारी चीज़ों को देख सकते हो, और थ्रू आउट हिस्ट्री आप इन चीज़ों को एक्सप्लोर कर सकते हो विद इन literary age. So that is all about today's class. If you have any question, you can ask me.
In this presentation, whatever you have presented about the history of English literature, so are these the only topics from where the questions will be pushed in the CUET exam, or there is other syllabus also?
Please speak again. I'm unable to hear you.
I'm asking, is this the whole syllabus which will be covered in the CUET, or it is just the history?
Again, okay, I'm getting it. This is the one unit, and it's related to different units as as well. So in your examination, you will get around 60 to 70% questions from here. Like when you look into the modern period, for example, right? A modern age और post modern age से बहुत सी चीजें add होती हैं. जैसे for example, literary theory came into being. So T.S. Eliot, the writer that you read in the modern period, you will find he was a bridge between literary criticism and literary theory. Right, so with him, you will find that new criticism has been introduced into literature. So new criticism in 1920s in Britain and in 1940s in America. तो वैसे ही पूरा एक डेवलपमेंट देखोगे, फॉर्मलिज्म आया, न्यू क्रिटिसिज्म आया, स्ट्रक्चरलिज्म आया, पोस्ट स्ट्रक्चरलिज्म आया. तो जब आप थ्योरी भी पढ़ते हो तो उसी ऑर्डर के साथ there are writers who are writing from the Britain, they are part of British literature, but there are other writers as well who are not writing from Britain but from writing from different areas. Like Russian Revolution जब USSR आया तो वहाँ पे फॉर्मलिज्म का बिगनिंग हुआ. तो सेम टाइम में 1920s में आप इंग्लैंड के अंदर लिटरेरी थ्योरी के अंदर पढ़ोगे राइटर्स को. सेम वे न्यू क्रिटिसिज्म 1940s अमेरिका में इंट्रोड्यूस होगा. 1910 में Sashore and he started talking about structuralism. Same way in 1950s 60s you will find reader response theory, and then post structuralism began. और 1940s के आसपास भी कई सारी कॉलोनीज ने भी अपना क्या किया, अटैक करना शुरू किया और अपना इंडिपेंडेंट हो गए. तो जैसे इंडिया got its independence in 1947. Just after that, in postmodernism, you will find post-colonial literature as well. Right? तो कई सारे राइटर्स जो आप ब्रिटिश लिटरेचर में पढ़ते हो, they are part of different things as well. जब आप क्रिटिसिज्म को पढ़ते हो, it begins with Plato, Aristotle, Horace, Longinus. They are part of Greco-Roman criticism. When you enter into the age of रेनेसा फॉर दैट मैटर, आप जब ब्रिटिश हिस्ट्री पर्सपेक्टिव से पढ़ते हो तो आप सिडनी को पढ़ते हो, आप साउथ अलग राइटर्स को पढ़ते हो, शेक्सपियर को पढ़ते हो, और सिडनी में ही आप डिफेंस ऑफ पोएजी पढ़ते हो जो क्रिटिसिज्म का पार्ट है. सेम वे जैसे ही आप 17th सेंचुरी में जाते हो, अलेक्जेंडर पोप को हिस्ट्री में पढ़ते हो, और अलेक्जेंडर पोप व्हाट ही थिंक्स अबाउट विट बिकम्स अ सिलेबस ऑफ अ पार्ट ऑफ दैट यू विल रीड इन लिटरेरी क्रिटिसिज्म. तो मेरे कहने का मतलब है कि ये सारे लिंक्ड है, इंटरलिंक्ड है एक दूसरे के साथ. जब आप रोमांटिक एज पढ़ते हो, विलियम वर्ड्सवर्थ को पढ़ते हो, विलियम वर्ड्सवर्थ इज अ पार्ट ऑफ ब्रिटिश हिस्ट्री. राइट, इन द सेम वे व्हेन ही केम अप विद preface to lyrical ballad in 1800, that become a part of literary criticism. When Coleridge came up with Biographia Literaria in 1817, that is a part of literary criticism. तो criticism क्या है? Criticism basically throughout history writers ने rules और regulation propound किए हैं to how. Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, so yes, so literary criticism and British history, in a way, they are related to each other, because in criticism, the writers or the works that you read, they are also part of British history. There are other writers as well, like जब आप literary theory पढ़ते हो, Sashore को पढ़ते हो structuralism में, Derrida को पढ़ते हो post structuralism में, या eco criticism पढ़ते हो for example. Eco criticism में कुछ राइटर्स हैं जो अमेरिकन इको क्रिटिसिज्म का पार्ट है, कुछ राइटर्स हैं जो ब्रिटिश इको क्रिटिसिज्म का पार्ट है. इन द सेम वे जब आप फेमिनिज्म पढ़ते हो तो यू नो मैरी वॉल्सटनक्राफ्ट, शी रोट अ वेरी फेमस वर्क इन 1792, विंडिकेशन ऑफ राइट्स ऑफ वुमेन, एंड दैट वाज द इमर्जिंग पॉइंट, दैट वाज द पॉइंट फ्रॉम वेयर फेमिनिज्म केम इनटू बीइंग. और उसके बाद आप देखोगे 1830s से इट बिकेम अ मूवमेंट फ्रॉम फर्स्ट वेव फेमिनिज्म फ्रॉम 1830s टू 1920s, देन सेकंड वेव फेमिनिज्म, थर्ड वेव फेमिनिज्म, इवन वी डू हैव फोर्थ वेव फेमिनिज्म इन द वर्ल्ड इन विच वी आर लिविंग नाउ, राइट. तो ये कैसे डेवलपमेंट हुए हैं? दीज राइटर्स हैं जो आप ब्रिटिश हिस्ट्री के अंदर भी पढ़ते हो, अलग जगह पे भी पढ़ते हो, और उनके वर्क्स उन थ्योरीज का भी पार्ट हो जाते हैं. तो फेमिनिज्म के कुछ राइटर्स यू विल कवर इट ड्यूरिंग रीडिंग ब्रिटिश हिस्ट्री, एंड द सेम वे यू विल आल्सो कवर इट व्हेन यू विल रीड अबाउट फेमिनिज्म इन जनरल, यू नो, इन अ डिफरेंट यूनिट ऑल टुगेदर. जब आप फेमिनिज्म को पढ़ते हो तो आप फेमिनिस्ट पर्सपेक्टिव से आप रीडिंग्स करते हो जेन ऑस्टिन की भी, राइट. आप लेकिन जब आप फेमिनिज्म पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से पढ़ते हो तो साइमन द वेवर और जैसे राइटर्स जो हैं, थ्योरिस्ट हैं, उन्होंने कौन सी थ्योरीज दी हैं, कौन से उनके कॉन्सेप्ट्स हैं, और वो कैसे आप लिटरेचर के अंदर यू नो परपेट कर सकते हो, दैट इज वन ऑफ द एरियाज दैट यू लुक इनटू व्हेन यू रीड फेमिनिज्म. तो फेमिनिज्म, मार्क्सिज्म फॉर दैट मैटर, सो मार्क्सिस्ट राइटर्स केम एंड दे सेड यू नो द एक्सप्लॉयटेशन ऑफ वर्किंग क्लास पीपल हैज बीन डन बाय द किंग्स. सो व्हेन यू एंटर इनटू द मॉडर्न एरा यू विल फाइंड दैट पीपल हैड नो फेथ ऑन किंग्स एज वेल. तो जो फेथ ऑफ पिलर्स हैं धीरे धीरे मॉडर्न एज में खत्म हो जाते हैं. यू कैन नॉट rely upon God because of Darwin's work that came into being, right? People were in doubt in Victorian age whether they should believe in religion or they should believe in science. तो ये scientific development की वजह से they cannot rely upon God. In the same way they cannot rely upon king. तो जो पूरा concept था you know to believing in divine rights of king, the Charles I was beheaded in 1649 just because of the fact that he said I am not responsible to any other person but God only. तो जब आप बोलते हो कि मैं सिर्फ गॉड को रिस्पॉन्सिबल हूँ, that is one of the reasons वो पार्लियामेंट से निगोशिएट करने को मना कर देता है, and he was killed, right? He was beheaded, the very first king to be beheaded in England. तो उसका क्या पर्सपेक्टिव है, वो कैसे चेंज हो रहा है? You cannot rely upon king as well because they are now you know reason for the exploitation of working class people. Human always needed someone to rely upon. जब आप मॉडर्न एज में जाते हो तो ना आप किंग पे विश्वास कर पा रहे हो, ना आप गॉड पे विश्वास कर पा रहे हो. इन द सेम वे डेमोक्रेसी, पीपल थॉट इफ आई कैन नॉट रिलाई अपॉन गॉड, आई कैन नॉट रिलाई अपॉन किंग, आई विल रिलाई अपॉन डेमोक्रेसी, क्योंकि डेमोक्रेसी को बहुत हाई प्रेज किया जाता था, राइट. बट व्हेन यू एंटर इनटू द मॉडर्न एरा यू फाइंड World War I, World War II, so many people died, there was no result of any you know any of those world wars. So the bloodshed that was taking place, it is because of democracy. So you cannot rely upon democracy as well. Same way people thought, okay, I can rely upon myself, what I think about me, what I think about others should be the reason to believe something, right? And psychoanalysis came. अगर आपने नाम सुना होगा फ्राइड का, फ्राइड came with his book called Interpretation of Dream in 1900, and he divided our mind into 3 parts: कॉन्शियस माइंड, अनकॉन्शियस माइंड, सबकॉन्शियस माइंड. और उसने बताया कि 90% ऑफ द थिंग्स दैट वी थिंक आर एक्चुअली इन अवर अनकॉन्शियस माइंड एंड वी हैव नो कंट्रोल एंड वी हैव नो नॉलेज अबाउट इट. तो हम अपने बारे में 90% चीज़ें जानते ही नहीं हैं. जब हम अपने बारे में ही नहीं जानते तो हम दूसरों के बारे में कैसे जानेंगे, राइट? तो यू कैन नॉट रिलाई अपॉन गॉड, on king, on democracy, on yourself, and that is why when you enter into 20th century you will find कि there is fragmentation, right? Aimlessness. 1920s में जब आप lost generation पढ़ते हो तो लोग aimless हैं. There are writers who killed themselves. हेमिंग्वे को पढ़ा होगा तो हेमिंग्वे committed suicide, right? Lost generation पूरी 1920s की ऐसी generation है जो they have no aim, they are wounded physically as well as mentally, the trauma of the war that was there. और उसको लिटरेचर में भी रिप्रेजेंट किया गया. अगर आप मिसेस डॉलोवे पढ़ोगे वर्जीनिया वुल्फ का तो आपको पता चलेगा there are characters like Septimus who was a part of a war and then he committed suicide, and in your examination they ask questions from there, from the trauma perspective, right? So if you know the characteristic, how every age is shaped, and that is how you will be able to understand the passage as well as the literature that was written during the time frame. तो जो criticism है, जो थ्योरी है, दे आर मोर और लेस रिलेटेड टू ब्रिटिश हिस्ट्री. और इसीलिए जब मैं बोल रहा हूँ कि 60-70% क्वेश्चन यहाँ से आते हैं तो इसका मतलब है कि वो क्रिटिसिज्म को भी कवर करते हैं, थ्योरी को भी कवर करते हैं. ना इन नेक्स्ट क्लासेस, फ्यू क्लासेस, आई विल ट्राई टू इंट्रोड्यूस यू विथ लिटरेरी क्रिटिसिज्म एंड लिटरेरी थ्योरी अलॉन्ग विथ genre, so that you will understand कि कैसे they are actually part of British history. जब हम बोलते हैं कि genre, for example, novel का development कैसे हुआ, so novel emerged in 18th century in Britain, right? कई सारे British writers हैं जिन्होंने novel लिखना शुरू किया. There are 4 pillars of novels, beginning with Fielding, beginning with Richardson, Sterne, Smollett, they are known as four pillars of novel. And throughout history, अब ब्रिटेन में देखोगे बहुत से नॉवेलिस्ट आते चले गए. Dickens, he was a British writer. Or for example, there are some Irish novelists as well that they are famous. Scottish writers, they are also famous. But Scotland, Ireland or Britain, they all merged into one with a Great Britain in 1707. So in one way, they all are related to British history. तो British literature जब पढ़ते हो, इसीलिए मैं कह रहा हूँ कि 60 से 70% क्वेश्चंस जो आपके हैं वो पूरा ब्रिटिश लिटरेचर को इस पर्सपेक्टिव से पढ़ने के बाद कवर हो जाता है. Although you look into feminism, Marxism or other units, theory, criticism with different perspective with the theorists, what they have written, the ideas that they have propounded, but they all are part of literature and you will come to know कि कैसे इन्हीं के ऊपर उन चीज़ों को आप अप्लाई कर सकते हो, राइट. तो दिस इज वन ऑफ द यूनिट्स, बट अगेन दिस इज इंटरलिंक्ड विद अदर यूनिट्स दैट यू हैव इन द सिलेबस. क्लियर?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay. Anything else? Anyone?
Sir, tomorrow the class will run on Google Meet only.
What?
Sir, tomorrow the class will run on Google Meet only.
From tomorrow you will be added in Teachment app and from Teachment app we will begin because Teachment पे आपका रिकॉर्डिंग हो सकता है तो वहाँ से उस चीज़ को शुरुआत करेंगे. कल हम क्रिटिसिज्म थ्योरी और जो दूसरी यूनिट है उनका इंट्रोडक्शन पढ़ेंगे और उसके बाद we will begin with from where we have to begin.
Sir, we will have classes every day.
Yeah, Monday to Saturday we will have classes और Sunday को in the शुरुआत में हम लोग क्या करेंगे, कुछ रिवाइज करेंगे एंड आफ्टर सम अमाउंट ऑफ सिलेबस हैज बीन कवर्ड तो उसके बाद से आपके वो एमसीक्यू टेस्ट स्टार्ट हो जाएंगे. मंडे टू सैटरडे 1 hour क्लास. ओके.
Good evening,
Okay,
sir.
Yeah.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
This is Shobha. Sir,
Yes, sir.
actually, I was asking how to chalk out the entire because the dates are in public domain right now. So, is there? Could you kindly help us to chalk out how to score the highest because it's the negative marking is there.
There is 4 marks for the right answer and 1 mark marking, negative marking. Okay, so if you, so in that manner, if you like, that's why I'm saying that there are questions based on assertion reason, question based on on the concepts that have been provided by the writers, not only in literature but in theory as well, in cultural studies as well, right? And in order to make clarity on that particular thing, you also need to understand the characteristics, the foundation of everything. So when I say feminism, it should not be just about the writers that you have read or about the concept like gynocriticism or literature, feminine for that matter, or male gaze, right? They're asking questions from these concepts. That is important. I'm not saying that is not important, and there are questions based on concept as well, but there are questions from reason and assertion too, right? So in order to understand and to clear those questions, you also need to understand how they have developed throughout. How, when I say that 1792 was the very first time when when the whole belief of the world changed, like it was believed, and when you will read works, you will find in Aristotle as well that women are inferior to men, right? Jefferson, who was the founding father of America, you will find he said there is no space for women in politics, and it was accepted till 1792. So after this work has changed everything. But when you read feminism from the books, you will find that it begins with 1830s when there was a suffrage movement, and it ended with 1920s when women were given rights to right to vote in 1920s. Then there was a need for second wave, there was a need for third wave, so on and so forth. But that is not how they will ask questions in reason and assertion basis. In reason and assertion, they will ask questions based on your understanding of the topic. For example, ecofeminism, right? When you think of ecofeminism, there are writers who have talked about how women as well as nature, they were both being exploited by one thing, that is male. So in order to to talk about women rights, first you should throw out the patriarchy. There is a reason for that why they are talking about, right? When you think of social feminism, for example, there are writers who are talking about how the world was matriarchal in the beginning, but after patriarchy, after capitalism, the world has become patriarchal. So in order to throw patriarchy out of it, you have to throw capitalism out of it. So there are different theories they have folded themselves according to the demands of themselves. Like Marxist people will have totally different perspective, feminist writers will have totally different perspective, and to choke down, to narrow down these particular things, you need to understand the concepts and the basic of everything. That's why I'm saying when you read British literature, it should not be about what writer has written what in which day, in which year, and in which week it was published. This is important. They will ask you questions from there as well, and there are so many dates that I can tell you which are important for your examination, beginning from 1066 to 1215 to 1348 to 1453, or later on in history you will find there are 50 or 100 dates that are important for examination, but that is not it. There are other questions, and in order to score higher than expected, you need to cover those areas as well. You need to understand everything base and how they begin, the emergence, the root of it, in order to choke down those things. Okay.
Okay.
Anything else?
Sir, what will be the timing for the class?
Uh, Today in the WhatsApp group we will be discussing about the timings. Like we can have 5 to 6 or 7 to 8 according to the demand of the people that are in the group. So I will be giving one poll today in the group, and as per what people want, according to that we will discuss it out, right? Primarily in the evening, either 5 to 6 or to 7 to 8, right? Or 6 to 7, 5 to 8 के बीच में कोई भी time of 1 hour we can take it out.
Okay, sir.
So will there be for part 1 there will be also mock test?
Yeah, for part 1 you will be getting classes, and that will be rectified by Vipul sir. Okay, you are also getting classes for part 1 as well.
Oh,
I'll be taking part B classes of English literature, and there will be teachers, other teachers for part A.
When will be the class for part second will start?
Part
Part first.
Part 2 will be beginning with tomorrow, and part 1 you will be notified by Vipul sir. We will be beginning with part 2 from tomorrow itself.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, our reply has been turned off in Study Capital app, and we cannot even reply in WhatsApp group. How can we raise question if we have some difficulties?
Yeah. So I will prepare a informal group for all of you. That is what I'm saying. Today I will create a group. I will share a link on your the present group, and you have to just add down on that particular thing, and there we will discuss those things, right? Me and you guys. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
The group that you are in at this time is a former group, and it's for the activities that will be going on in the coaching center, but we will create an informal group. I will be doing that in the night itself today. Okay. Anything else?
No, sir.
Okay, then we'll begin tomorrow. Hope you will understand everything, and please, the one thing for sure कि आपको just have patience. You have 4 to 5 months, and if you will give 2 hours every day, 1 hour for the part B, half an hour for the part A, and also revising everything that we are discussing in the class, at the end of the syllabus you will be in a very comfortable position. But it needs your patience, it needs your honesty. So you attend every class every day, and there will be no need to to form anything else after that. That's my promise to you, but you have to attend every class, and you have to be regular in the classroom. Okay. So with this I will conclude this class, and we'll meet tomorrow.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Will the timings remain same every day?
Yes, we will. We will discuss about the timings in the group that I will create in the. And after that, the time will be same for every day. If there will be, any issue, we can change the timings, but more or less it will be same for every day.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So with this, thank you everyone. Bye bye, and we'll meet tomorrow and discuss.